Good morning, everybody. It is good to be together. It's good to see sunshine. It's fantastic to see sunshine. A couple phrases that have been part of what I'm planning to talk about. I heard the word once so far in our service, and Jason used it, and it might have even been in a prayer. It just stuck out to me. Detail. Detail. You ever hear somebody say, "Spare me the details"? Some things we like details about, right? Some things we don't need the details about. It depends 100% where you are. Bear with me. So if a new baby is born and there's a group of ladies sitting around, they need details of how this child came, right? They need details. I'm sitting there, it's like, is the child fine? Is it a boy or a girl? That's enough details for me. I don't need to know details. But some people love them, and some people just don't need them. Who cares? You heard that one? Who cares? You can say that differently. You can say it flippantly, like, who cares? Meaning, I certainly don't. Does anybody else? Or you can say, who cares about what I'm going through right now? It's totally different. Who cares? And so I ask the question, does God care about details? And if he does, which ones? How do we know? How do we know what details God really cares about? I have a few things that I would look at as far as examples. Some have situations in the Bible where there was very detailed instructions given. And the instructions weren't just given as a general idea of what you ought to do. They were instructions that were to be followed. Interesting with the slide thingy up here this morning, and Jason all of a sudden realizing that, oh, you know what, it's not working, and don't have a backup. If I gave a list of 10 instructions, just off the bat, and yeah, I'll do it. So I was just thinking this morning, a father just tells his child before he goes to bed, he said, you know what, I want you to get up in the morning at 6:30. What I would like you to do is to then, go, you can make coffee if you want, but I want you to pour a bowl of cereal, Cheerios, eat that. And then I want you to have some wheat toast with cheddar cheese. And then I want you to drink orange juice. What I want you to do after that is to take the trash out, but it has to be on the right side of the driveway. And then when you're done with that, you can get ready to go to work, but you should definitely leave for work at 7:40. And when you go, this is the direction that you need to go. And when you get to work, I'm going to let that up to your boss what you have to do. But they're like, wait, what? Writing down, how am I supposed to know all those details? How am I supposed to remember that? If I was saying that to a group of people, if I gave you all 10 things quickly that you should do in the next 2 minutes, I doubt whether many of you would remember them all. But what you would do is maybe ask, would you collaborate a little bit? Would you get together and say, I remember the third one, I remember the first one, but what was that number 2? And so if someone else remembers it and you can get together and you can help that person remember, and maybe, together you could remember them. But to me, there's beauty in that, there's benefit in that, but the details actually matter. So, Genesis 6. I have 9 commandments here. we call them commandments, instructions, because this was a matter of life and death. It's like, do as I say, and you're not going to die. Build a large boat from cypress wood. Waterproof it with tar inside and out. Construct decks throughout its interior. Make the boat 450 feet by 75 feet by 45 feet. Leave an 18-inch opening around the perimeter. Put the door on the side. Build 3 decks inside the boat. Lower, middle, and upper. Enter the boat. Bring a pair of every kind of animal, a male and a female, into the boat with you. And be sure to take on board enough food for you and your family and all the animals. Nowhere did God tell Noah how long this was going to last. I mean, it's not recorded that he did. A couple things that I learned as I was reading this. God said the animals are going to come to you in pairs. I always kind of pictured him going out and cowboying and rodeo and whatever and rounding these things up. No. But I'm like, was there any fight among the animals saying, did they have any sense, or did just one pair of lions show up? Or was like, I don't know. Doesn't matter. That's a detail that obviously doesn't matter. What does matter is verse 22. It says, so Noah did everything exactly as God commanded him. I brought this along for the kiddos. There's not many kiddos here. I know the box is square, okay? But if this was 450 feet, actually this way, did God say which the dimensions were? Just 450 by 45 by 75, right? You know, those are details that matter an awful lot, right? Now, 450 feet long, like not long this way, but long this way. We have shed customers all the time that say the front of the building. Oh, the front. No, the front in their mind is always where the door is. It doesn't matter if the door is on the side, that becomes the front of the building. And it's like, no, the front is like this. This is the front, this is the side. But, you know, if there would have been confusion between Noah and his sons, they said, I remembered the 450. You know, what number did you, there was a 45 in there someplace. There was a 75 in there someplace. You know, if you had a foundation that's 45 by 75 feet tall, you could build a pretty tall something off of it, but it wouldn't work the best for a boat. Is this the first boat that was ever built? I used to think it was, but I'm like, there's no... I said he had no idea what a boat was. He probably did. Why wouldn't there have been boats? There was pockets of water, and there was land and wind, and they probably had sailboats and motorboats and everything. We don't know that. That's a detail we don't have to know. Jumping over to Exodus 12. Some more commandments. Some more life or death commandments. Makes a huge difference. Pay attention. Listen closely, because if you don't do as I say, people are going to die. On the 10th day of this month, each family must choose a lamb or a young goat for a sacrifice. Divide the animal according to the size of each family and how much they can eat. The animal you select must be a 1-year-old male, either a sheep or a goat, with no defects. Take special care of this chosen animal until the evening of the 14th day, so it's around 4 days. The whole assembly of the community of Israel must slaughter their lamb at twilight. These are details that really, really mattered. Take some of the blood and smear it on the doorposts. Frames along the side, some across the top. That needs to be done in the house where the animal is going to be eaten. That same night they must roast the meat over a fire and eat it along with a bitter salad, greens, and bread made without yeast. I never thought about it until this time thinking through. It could have smelled mighty fine in Egypt if everybody was roasting an animal over an open fire. Do not eat any of the meat raw or boiled in water. It's like, yes, I like that one. It's like hot dogs boiled in water. It's like, no. It's a terrible thing. Do not leave any of it until the next morning. If there's leftovers, burn it. Be fully dressed. Wear your sandals. Carry your walking stick. And eat with urgency. How in the world are we supposed to remember all this stuff? And how much of it is important? What's the most important thing out of all this? I don't know if you can pick one specifically, because they had to obey it all. I always go to the blood, and I say, it's the blood on the doorpost. That's hands down the most important part. Because what was that for? It was a sign to the angel of death, and he sees that and says, nope, not this house. Do you think it ever entered someone's mind to say, ew, blood? Like, just nasty. I don't want to put blood on my doorpost, but, I have red paint, and let me put some paint on. What do you think would have happened? People would have died because they didn't follow instructions. Instructions were extremely important. This is how it has to be done. Exodus 12, verse 50. So all the people of Israel followed all the Lord's commandments that he gave to Moses and Aaron. Joshua chapter 6. So Joshua called all the priests together, and all he's doing here is just telling the people what God told him. Take up the ark of the Lord's covenant, assign 7 priests to walk in front of it, each of them carrying a ram's horn. March around the town, and the armed men will lead the way in front of the ark of the Lord. How many have a clue how many armed men this was? A couple chapters back, it said that there was 40,000 men ready for battle. So that kind of changed my perspective on how many people are marching around this city as well. If you were a general and you had 40,000 troops at your disposal, and it says that they had swords and they were ready to fight, and you said, guys, actually, what we're going to do is we're going to walk around the city. And we're going to blow horns. And another thing is, you may not say a single word. Absolute silence. Nobody may utter a word. You know the only reason this worked? A couple verses before this, it says that Joshua, actually, let me back up. God made Joshua likable. I'm not sure what word it used. In other words, everybody loved Joshua, and they trusted him. That's the only reason this worked at all, because they trusted their leader, and he's telling them what to do, and they said, all right, we're going to do it. We know the story. 7th day, 7 times. Don't say a thing. Absolute silence. When I give a signal, you can shout for all you're worth. And then, the wall's going to come down. The wall's going to fall down, actually. We are a people of too many questions sometimes. And I think we would have all kinds of questions about obeying this. Like, say, what? It's not like this has happened all the time before. It's not like you could, if you got loud enough, that you could knock things over with your voice. It's not if there's enough voices, you can start knocking things over with your voice. But they obeyed. It's a matter of life or death. Is it going to work or isn't it? Let's follow the instructions. Verse 20 says, when the people heard the sound of the ram's horns, they shouted as loud as they could, and suddenly the walls of Jericho collapsed, and the Israelites charged straight into the town and captured it. They completely destroyed everything in it with their swords. Men, women, and children. Everything. Killed it. How many know what Joshua 7 verse 1 says? But Israel violated the instructions about the things set apart for the land. Was there a man named Israel? No, there's a man named Achan. It says a man named Achan had stolen some of these dedicated things, so the Lord was very angry with the Israelites. Doesn't seem fair to me. Don't be angry with me. It's my brother that sinned. It's Achan. It was him. Why are you angry with me? Why do more people have to die? Because you're angry at Achan. It says he was angry with the Israelites because somebody had sinned. I'm not 100% sure. I would love to hear opinions on that sometime, what the lesson in that is for us. All I know is that if we choose to live in sin and think that it does not affect anybody else, we're only kidding ourselves, because it most certainly does affect other people. Details. Does God care about how we live? Does God care what choices we make? Did the New Testament usher in a different God than what the Old Testament people knew? He still cares about details. He still cares whether he's obeyed or not. While I was doing some research and studying, I'm thinking like, wow, when I read over all the commandments in the Old Testament, it's so overwhelming. And I'm thinking like, so there's much fewer commandments in the New Testament, and they seem different. I didn't go through the Bible and count commandments. I'm trusting some of the online sources for this, but does the number 613 or 630 sound right to somebody about the amount of commandments in the law? Do you have any clue about that, Daniel? Yeah, around 600, which sounds really difficult. How in the world are you supposed to know all those things? Somebody also took the time and went through the New Testament and picked out all the commands that Jesus gave. And there's over 1,200. So it's not like we're getting off. It's not like we don't have to obey. Can someone help me out here? How many of the commands of Jesus do we have forefront in our minds? It stumped me a little bit when I tried to think quickly of like Jesus gave lots of commands. What? I have a few here. If you are offering your gift at the altar and remember that your brother or sister has done something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. Go and be reconciled, and then come back. It's a command of Jesus. Do you think he cares about that? But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Store up treasures in heaven. Do not worry about tomorrow. Do we take these seriously? These actually commands? Does he care? Are these to be obeyed? As you enter a home, give it your greeting. I am sending you out like sheep among wolves, therefore be shrewd as snakes and innocent as doves. Be on your guard. I don't know, this week, a couple of young men here, and I know not so young man here knows that I struggled this week to stay ahead of bad thoughts. Somehow it felt to me like the enemy knew that he would love nothing more than for me to stand and share in front of you in defeat. I think he loves that, when men stand up and they share, but inside they've actually been defeated all week. Some young men prayed for me, which is amazing. Older brother prayed for me, which is amazing. And God is absolutely faithful. But for me to say that I don't have to be on my guard, I have to be on my guard ever so much the more so when I'm going to be sharing something, because the enemy wants us to be living in defeat. When you're persecuted in one place, flee to another. What? You can see that you do not despise one of these little ones. Give back to Caesar what is Caesar's. Give to God what is God's. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. These are all commands, straight out of the mouth of Jesus. Watch out that no one deceives you. And I think just because there's the possibility that we let a list like this that we don't even, maybe they're not, none of these are unfamiliar, right? They're all familiar things. How much are they in the forefront of our minds? And how proactive are we at saying, yes, that is my intent, is to obey those? Just in case, he says this one, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, my burden is light. None of these things, none of his commandments are intended to drag us down. They're intended to build us up, to give us inspiration. When I think back to the scenario of me giving 10 instructions and people not sure what I said or did they understand me correctly and following each other, how important is it that we understand God's commandments ourselves? Sometimes we like to look at other people and see how they're doing it, and it's like, oh, well, okay, right, that must be God's way. Or we look back through history and say, oh, that was definitely God's. Well, let me imitate that because that was definitely God's way. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But we have to know that the people that we want to be like, I don't know, I think it's probably not the most awesome thing to try to be like other people. Because if you have a bunch of people trying to be like Jesus, and that's our goal, I think that's going to be easier to spot in people than you try to mimic somebody else. What do we get out of it if we obey? We can look back through those situations and you say, wow, the Israelites spared their firstborn because they obeyed. Noah spared his family because he obeyed the details. Joshua was successful in his tearing down of Jericho because he obeyed. What's in it for us? What incentive is there for us to obey the commands of Jesus? John 15:14 says, you are my friends if you do what I command you. 1 John 2:3-6, we know that we have come to know him if we keep his commands. Whoever says, I know him, but does not do what he commands is a liar, and the truth is not in that person. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:19. John 15:10, if you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice. There's a difference between hearing and putting them into practice. Is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. He has a foundation. My encouragement is to think about the commands of Jesus. I intend to look into it a whole lot more since I've kind of started on this little journey. People watch us. Actually, we watch each other, right? Beyond that, if every one of us goes a separate way, there's a different group of people watching us as we go through life. It's my goal, and I hope each of our goals, is that when people do see us, and they are watching us, they're observing, they're scrutinizing us, what do they see? Is it something that actually will point them to the Father? Or is it something that just makes them scratch their head and say, just like I thought, another one of those? My encouragement is, let's not be bashful. Let's not be timid, because the Lord is on our side, and He will lead us. He will give us victory. Jesus' last words before He ascended into heaven: go ye into all the world, make disciples, baptize, teach them everything that I commanded you. So I believe that that is something that we can all use every day. Spare me the details. I don't think the Lord wants us to spare details, but He does want us to dive into His Word and to collect exactly what we need for that day. Thank you very much. Get my arc.